Okay, can you see it? Awesome. So my name is Katie Glenn, and I am a graduate student at ASU. I am about to finish. I will be graduating in 4 weeks, and I am joined with my co-author and assistant professor, Dr. Alan Colburn. And today we're going to be talking about the normalization of crimmigration framing in news coverage of immigration enforcement. And I want to make note that this is part of a larger project. We saw part of the project earlier with MOPI, and this is a completely different project that is stemming from a lot of the same research. These two have two very different conceptual frameworks. So let's just jump right in for the sake of time. So when we look at news framing, we are taking a look at just the different words that are being used in relation to immigration and illegal immigrant. When we're looking at these two separate instances, what we see here is just how different news sources are using different verbiage to kind of paint a picture of these separate incidents. So what we see here is terms like illegal immigrant, deported, but then also on the other side, we also see wrong way driver. And so we're looking at these different articles in relation to immigration, and it actually brings us to our research questions of how is crimmigration framed in the news coverage of immigration enforcement? And do crimmigration frames vary across news sources, national and state, progressive and restrictive, and then also over time? And now for those of you who aren't familiar with the term crimmigration, it's this intersection of criminal law and immigration law. And what we really want to take a look at is what are the terms that the media is using to paint this picture of immigrants as criminals? So our scholarship is deep within a bunch of different areas. We study illegality. We draw off of current scholarship on crimmigration, immigration federalism, news framing of immigrants and immigration, as well as borderlands. So how we did this? What are we doing here? So we started with a large search term, looking at 3 different news databases, looking at ProQuest, Nexus Uni, and Newsbank. And what we did here was we typed this large search term into these, looking at a span that ranged from 1985 up until August of 2021. And so what we really wanted to capture here are all of the articles in all of these different specific databases that use terms like non-criminal migrants, illegal immigrant, et cetera, just to get this vast array of different articles. From there, we added, just for specific for this project itself, we wanted to really dive into the enforcement side. So we added another search term on top of that. So we take these large articles and we narrow it down a little bit further. So we look for things like customs enforcement, ICE, secure communities, et cetera. And initially what we're looking at are these different news sources. And so we're looking at the Washington Post and the Washington Times. And in the very beginning, we were looking at some Arizona sources. And so through this, we were at close to about 10,500 articles that we started to review. So then using software, qualitative software like NVivo, what we wanted to do was we really wanted to take a look at these units of analysis and do a structured focus comparison. So within NVivo, what we did was we did another search. We did a query that included words that were in relation to each other. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to see how many of these articles had these words like crime near immigrants, undocumented near illegal or crime, et cetera. And so the purpose of this was we wanted to look at any time that these words are within a 30-word spread of each other, because although these terms might not be directly next to each other, putting them within a 30-word spread, we think that it really kind of paints a picture in the reader's mind that it connects the two together subconsciously. And so we have a good number of findings over here on the right of these different news sources. So within NVivo, what we did was we went and just did a full text analysis of it. We opened up each of these articles and we really wanted to look at the context. So what we did was we opened it up within 99 words of the coded reference. We looked at it above and below because we wanted to see exactly what is going on in the overall article. What are they actually saying? Because if we just looked at what the specific coding, the specific coded reference was, we're not getting an accurate picture of the context of what the story is actually about. And so I want to make note here that because we had so many articles, we actually had 8 student coders. And with that, we constantly were running intercoder reliability tests because we wanted to make sure that all of our coders were on the same page. Because if you thought that our search term was large, our coding scheme was even bigger. So we wanted to make sure that everyone was constantly on the same page. And so we were running these reliability tests throughout the course of this project, just to make sure that we're all coding the same. And so for the sake of time, I'll run through this, but you can see that a lot of crimmigration framing was occurring, and there was also some anti-criminalization framing occurring. And so we're really going to dive into the initial analysis and kind of our early findings. And so when we take a look at 2 main news sources, the Washington Post and the Washington Times, which are historically 2 very different news sources, one being very restrictive and one being very progressive. And one of the interesting things that we found is that across both of them, the references ended up kind of looking the same. So we're seeing a good number of this good versus bad binary on both sides, the good versus bad, also the criminal record. And basically our findings are seeing that both of these are kind of mirroring each other. And even when we get into this threat narrative as well. And so we were really interested in that. And that kind of sparked a little bit of a question for us and really wanting to dive deeper. I'll run through this. This is just some examples of some of the binaries that were being presented in both of these articles, kind of saying the same thing. So one thing that I did want to point out is that when we were looking at all of these, there's a light here, and there was a lot of counter-crimmigration being framed as well, specifically when it humanizes the, immigrants and immigration in general. And what that is as you can see in these examples, the one on the left, it describes a father who was arrested at a coffee shop whenever he was staying at Johns Hopkins with his child who was undergoing cancer treatment. And so the article really just humanizes the people in the article just to show that they're just living their lives as normal human beings. So when we saw this, the first thing that came to our mind was, is it that the news media is actually just starting to normalize this crimmigration framing? Because we're seeing it on both sides and we're seeing it so frequently. And so what we did was we wanted to run a network analysis to see where are all of these codes occurring within each other and how are they looking within the text itself. So what we did was we ran network analysis to see how are they occurring within 2 to 3 paragraphs of each other. And what we're finding—
a quick 2-minute reminder or warning.
Okay, I'll just keep running through it. So what we did with that, so initially what we were doing was we were looking at the unit level. So we were looking at the overall article. And so now, because we're seeing this, it sparked a question in our mind of what's actually going on. So we're actually shifting our focus now to look at the within unit level to see, because what we're seeing from that network analysis is that a lot of these codes on both sides are occurring within the same article together. So going forward, what we plan to do is we're going to unpack and read the entire article and code together to see how are they working in conjunction with each other to maybe offset to actually portray using one mechanism and one framing to actually paint a very different picture of the overall article. So then we want to look at various states. We also want to look at California. And because Arizona and California are so vastly different, we want to see what the difference is going on between the 2 states. And then also we want to look at time and across specific areas. We want to cross-reference these findings with a time scale to see what events are going on at the time, like policy changes, elections, and see if that has any effect of it as well. We also want to unpack the network analysis even further and just really dive in to see how are these 2 codes, how are they working in conjunction with each other in order to really frame the articles themselves. So I welcome any feedback and questions and comments, and thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Katie, and congrats on your upcoming